The Creative Nonfiction Podcast is sponsored by Goucher College's Master of Fine Arts in Nonfiction. The Goucher MFA is a 2-year, low-residency program. Online classes let you learn from anywhere, while on-campus residencies allow you to hone your craft with accomplished mentors who have Pulitzer Prizes and best-selling books to their names. The program boasts a nationwide network of students, faculty, and alumni, which has published 140 books and counting. You'll get opportunities to meet literary agents and learn the ins and outs of the publishing journey. Visit goucher.edu/nonfiction to start your journey now. Take your writing to the next level and go from hopeful to published in Goucher's MFA program for nonfiction. By the time you hear this, I might be legally deaf. Why? Because 2 days ago, I saw... Give me fuel, give me fire, give me I sure as hell hope I don't get sued for that. How about some music I actually paid for? Yes, I saw my home team play for 2 massive hours. My wife told me that I had to wear earplugs on account of the damage I've done to my ears in the past 38 years. Do not tell her, but I took one of them out. I'm as bad as I want to be. My ears already ring all day, so whatever. It's driving me to the brink of insanity as is. What's another 2 hours of pulse pounding, tympanic membrane reducing Metallica? Anyway, you probably want to know who's on the show this week. It's, of course, why you tune in. This is the Creative Nonfiction Podcast. You know, the show where I talk to badass writers, filmmakers, and producers about the art and craft of telling true stories, whereby I unpack their artist journey and tap into the routines and habits about doing the work. This week, for episode 129, is Lisa D'Appolito, the mastermind behind the brilliant documentary Love Gilda, about the legendary comedian and comedic actor Gilda Radner. We talk about Lisa's early life growing up in Greenwich Village, her transition from acting to filmmaking, and what really drew her to Gilda Radner. If that sounds at all intriguing, that's what we do here at CNF Pod HQ. Consider subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts, and follow me and the show on Twitter at Brendan O'Mara and at CNF Pod. It's another little playpen of the internet where we hang out and talk about this kind of stuff. If you're a repeat listener of the show, I'd deeply appreciate it if you left an honest review over on iTunes. I also have a monthly newsletter, where I send out my reading recommendations of what you might have missed from the world of the podcast on the first of the month. Head over to BrendanO'Mara.com, for show notes and to subscribe to the newsletter. Once a month, no spam. Can't beat it. What else? Oh yes, today's podcast is brought to you by Creative Nonfiction Magazine. For nearly 25 years, Creative Nonfiction has been fuel for nonfiction writers and storytellers, publishing a lively blend of exceptional long and short-form nonfiction narratives and interviews, as well as columns that examine the craft, style, trends, and ethics of writing true stories. In short, creative nonfiction is true stories well told. I think that should just about do it. Here's my conversation with the brilliant Lisa D'Appolito. Greenwich Village among a lot of artists and creative people. What kind of influence did that have on you as a young person as then you progressed through your middle school years into high school and so forth?
I think it had a lot of influence, even though my parents weren't creative people. I think our teachers in school were really creative, and my best friend's mom was and she's still like my mentor. She was an off-Broadway director and actor, off-Broadway, like very bohemian. Mm-hmm. Her name is Sandy Shurin, and just thinking outside of box creativity. So I got it like sort of by osmosis from just being around a lot of creative people, I think.
Mm.
And the public school system, in some ways, in New York, is awful, but in some ways, it's very good too, because you're exposed to all these amazing museums and theater, and you take class trips to all these great places. So there's a lot of stimuli and creative ideas floating around.
That's got to be tremendously, just the city as a resource has to be so great because, like you're saying, at your fingertips, really, if you had that inclination to be a painter, you can go check out the museums, or an actor, as you have done. You know, you have Broadway and off Broadway, and that must have been really influential, like outside of the boundaries of school.
Yeah, I mean, we had really, it's interesting with Facebook. You find all your old friends online, and now we're starting to find our old teachers. And when we were in junior high school and we were about 14 to 17, some of our teachers were only like 21 or 22 or 23. So it's really interesting. I'm sure that is all over the country. You have young teachers. But, they were really creative, and we were really lucky. Not everybody has that luck in New York, but it is there if you're lucky to have somebody expose it to you.
They must have, even if they were that young, they must have seemed so old to you at the time too, even though there was only like 5 or 6 years between you.
Yeah, it's so strange because somebody posted our 5th grade class online, and they talked about our teacher, Mr. Tobin, who we had found online. And he was only 21 years old, but he wrote all these plays, and he was an actor, and we just thought he was the coolest person in the world. And we were all remembering like parts that he wrote for us. And this wasn't like a theater school or anything. This was just a regular class. But we were really lucky. I think I was really lucky to be around so many creative people. And at the time, Greenwich Village really was a magnet for creative people.
And what did that 5th grade Lisa see herself doing in the future?
Oh, I think I always wanted to be an actress from the time I was a kid. Mm. So that was really sort of what I always wanted to do.
And what steps did you start taking as maybe you started to show some talent and some adherence to wanting to do it? What were some of those paths along the way, or the things along the way that you were using to sort of manifest that dream, and maybe some mentors who were coaching you along the way too?
I don't think I really had any acting talent, to be honest with you, finding out later in life. But but everyone has dreams, and that's what you want to do. And I think I never, I dabbled in all kinds of different art. Like in junior high school, I played the flute, and then I went to an art school for high school. And but along the way, I was always in plays, and I started getting professional work when I was younger. Commercials and things like that. So there was a lot of, I think my teachers, my friends, there was a lot of influences because people were really doing their own thing. And so I don't know, I think in some ways it all adds, your whole life kind of adds up to who you are. And, it's like layers of different things you experience, adds into the, if you're doing a creative project, I think it all adds into that.
At what point in your journey as an actor did you start to think, oh, you know what, I might be more comfortable, or I want to at least experiment being behind the camera?
My ex-husband was an actor. So when my son was born, we were both actors. And it's not a really easy life if you're not working full time. Mm-hmm. So one of us had to get a real job. So I fell into this part-time. My friend got me a job at this ad agency, and somehow I fell into the production department because even though I wasn't a producer, I knew all the casting directors, and I knew all the production companies, and I knew how casting and stuff like that worked. So once I started doing that, I really loved it, and I really saw how much easier it is to be on the other side of the camera than to be in front of it.
how valuable was it for you going, having been in front of the camera and gone through casting and even working on some high profile projects? I'm sure many people are familiar with you and have done even just a modicum of research, know that you were in Goodfellas. So you worked on some, prime sets. So how did being in front of the camera influence and help you when you got behind the camera?
Well, one, I had a lot of sympathy for actors.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was, and a lot of sympathy for crew people. So I kind of understood what everybody did in terms of production and what they go through. And I knew everybody's role. So I think I tried to always to always put the best productions together with the best people possible, because I was very lucky. Even at, besides from Goodfellas, I worked on a lot of other movies, either in production or as a stand-in, and so I really worked with, I saw the best people work, and those really amazing directors are so nice to work for, and the I learned that the most successful people create the best experience for the people on the set. So I think I didn't think thought about it, but I think I learned that, because I think also people think like acting, directing, you have this kind of idea of what it is. And it really is just really hard work with people working really hard and doing the best, doing their jobs the best that they can.
Right. That so many people they don't realize, just like you're saying, that to make a piece of art, whether that's a documentary film, a true story, or even a feature films that are fictitious and anything, that kind of rigor that goes into the day-to-day grind of it. And at what point did you realize, especially as a director and filmmaker, that like, oh, this is a grind. I need to find ways to check in with myself so I don't get overwhelmed by the sheer titanic mass of the project?
I don't know if I ever did that. I just think there's such satisfaction when you see it all come together, whether it's a commercial, once you go through different phases. Once everything's shot and then you're sitting in the edit room, there's a new stress that happens. And then there's a new excitement as it starts to get put together. And so I think there's different periods for different, you get to relax at different points in different periods. I think at least it was for me. And I always loved the excitement of being I really love the excitement of being on a set. And I also really like the somewhat relaxing feeling it is to be in an edit room. I think the part that was always the stressful for me was, in my professional life, in advertising, was before everything was put together, before you really knew you were doing a project and you were trying to put all the pieces together. And I think that was the same thing with my film, is before you have the money or you have the talent or that's the stressful part for me, is not knowing if something's going to happen or not. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm sure in your head you have a sort of an idealized vision of what you want it to look like, but you have to still get all those ducks in a row. Yeah, and you have to motivate and push to make things happen too. Right. So there's a lot of self-motivation. What is that self-talk like for you to keep yourself motivated?
I don't know. I have a good support system of friends around me, and so it's always good to have somebody to talk to when you're really feeling like, oh my God, I don't think this is going to happen, or that. So I think I have that, which is really good. And I think somebody told me every day to do the thing you don't want to do the first. The first thing of the day should be the thing you really don't want to do. So that really kind of helps in some ways when you get the thing over, that whether it's like you want to make a phone call to ask somebody to be involved in your project, or whether you have to, I don't know, pick up your laundry. Sometimes it's like the thing you don't, and I found that kind of freeing creatively, because you can waste a lot of time worrying about things, or worrying about like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this. But when you do it and you get it, or at least for me, you get it out of the way, then you can move on to the other things that really matter.
Yeah, it kind of creates its own momentum in a way too, when you're able to sort of knock off those tasks that are taking up a lot of sort of RAM inside your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them are big, some of them are big tasks, like, emailing somebody or calling somebody and asking them for support, to ask them for money for a film, or to ask them to be in the film, or so some of those are big things, right, and some are little.
Yeah. There are moments too. It's hard for me to sometimes pick up the phone and have an interview, whether I'm writing a story or even having a podcast or anything, to have that interview, because there's a certain degree of performance anxiety, if you will, that I sort of suffer with. And those things, if I don't, like you're saying, like if I don't knock them out like early, that can really sort of weigh you down like a lead vest. Is that similarly, are there kind of anxieties of that nature that you kind of wrestle with, that once you get them out of the way, you're like, it frees you up to be the creative person that you are?
I guess it depends on different things, because with Love Gilda, it started as a passion project. So I've always been like the main filmmaker producer on it. So there's a lot of paperwork and financial stuff and things that if it wasn't a passion project, there would be a team of people to help. So I think those are those are like in the whole scheme of making a film, that's has been the biggest anxiety sometimes for me, is to follow up on paperwork and expenses and Excel sheets and things that are totally they have nothing to do with the creative process, but they have to do with, the whole overall production.
Yeah. And also as a passion project too, most things you're just accountable to yourself, but then maybe as you start to get investors and backers, suddenly you're not just beholden to you and your vision. It's kind of like you've got other people you have to think about too, because you don't want to let them down. I imagine that kind of weighs on you too.
Yeah, it weighs down on you, but it also motivates you. Like early on in my project, I did an Indiegogo campaign and raised a decent sum of money. So there were like 400 people who gave big and small to the project, and they're all waiting for the film to come out. So in some ways it weighs you down, but in some ways you're accountable, because you're like, oh my God, these people like gave money, and these people, they have their trust in you that you're gonna complete what you said you're gonna complete. Because it is really nice for people to give you money that don't even know you.
Yeah.
Because they support your project. I mean, that's, and I owe like when, like just on a side note, after the film comes out, the film comes out on DVD and on demand, I still have to honor all the people who donated and would get a DVD. So those are like the little things that kind of have weighed me down on this project. But it's also wonderful that I had that support, because I wouldn't have probably started the film unless I had that seed money.
Yeah, and it's got to be on top of just having the money to help with resources and travel and whatever it is to help assemble the thing. It's also incredibly validating that you have, like, it's almost like you have an audience that's hungry for this, and that's like, oh, I'm not just making this in vain. There's actually going to be people who want to see this when it's done. Yeah.
It was great to know that there were so many people who love Gilda out there. I had a feeling there were, but it was really nice that there were people who wanted to see something about her.
And when you take on projects of this nature, of course, they take a long time. It took you 4.5 years from conception to putting it together. Often, you're going to be with this for a long time, and oftentimes you're drawn to a certain subject because there could be something that you see in that main subject that sort of reflects back to you. So did you like when you take on a subject like Gilda, what elements of you did you see in her, and what connection did you have with her as you were making the film and doing all your research?
I think a lot, in the sense of I really loved learning about how she developed her characters and all the process that led to her career. So I really loved and identified with, her younger years in theater and how she created her characters. So I really loved that part. And also, I think many parts of her, her insecurities about what she looks like and who she was. I think it was something that I and so many other people can identify with. I wasn't saying like, oh, I was exactly like her, but I can understand the insecurities she had and why she had them. And as an outsider, you think when people have it all, they should have it all. But underneath it all, there's, probably no one's 100% happy. There's always something. And you can look at somebody's life and see like Gilda was at the time America's sweetheart and got an Emmy, and then she's struggling with all these inner things that are going on. So I found that very interesting and very real. And then on another note, I had gone through my family's illness, my grandmother and my parents, so I can identify with. Not exactly through, because Gilda was the person who was actually going through it herself, but I can identify with that, the pain and the unknowing and the uncertainty of what life is like when you have a health situation.
Yeah, is that experience that you had with the illness in your family what kind of brought you to Gilda's club?
No, it's interesting because I never made the connection for some strange reason, even though Gilda's club is like 3 blocks away from where I grew up. It took me a long time to realize why I love Gilda's club so much. I think I loved it because I loved the people, the spirit of the people who are going through these really challenging times and are open and honest, and have fun and have humor and have support and support each other. So I think I found people very courageous because I would interview them for these fundraising videos, and they were so open, and many, or if not most, had very serious cancers and illnesses. And were able to talk about it and face it. And I just found that really, really inspiring. And, Gilda's spirit kind of lives on there in Gilda's club, and many of the members had read her book. So once I started doing the fundraising videos, I read her book, and so I guess I just was very inspired by her. But then later on, my friends are like, why you love Gilda, why you're doing this film, or why you love Gilda's club. And I was like, oh, because I love Gilda. And they're like, no, because of your parents. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. In some ways, I kind of wish, Gilda's club has support for people who are going through, and their family who are going through things. And it opened a year after my parents passed away. I guess in some ways I get that kind of support now by still working on projects for them.
Did your parents pass away in the same year?
Yeah, it's kind of sad if I say it all out loud. But my dad and my mother and my grandmother all within 18 months, and I was pregnant at the time.
Oh man.
Yeah. So yeah, I know it sounds so sad.
I'm so yeah, well, it is. It is very sad. I'm really sorry you had to go through that.
So I think that was sort of why, in terms of Gilda, I didn't come from the project thinking I want to do a film about Rosanna Dana and her characters. I think I started, the project was really first about Gilda's club, and then it morphed more into Gilda's legacy at Gilda's club, and then it morphed into more of Gilda's journey with cancer, and then it was her whole life, because I felt like I wanted to know who she was.
Right, because you could have easily have taken the direction of making this solely about her comedy and her and that public side of her, but you went to a much more raw and vulnerable place with her. And when were you conscientious of that was going to be your vision of this film?
Well, I always wanted it to be, I never wanted it to be like just a series of sketches about it. But I think there was a very big changing point in the film. And that was when Gilda's brother, who's been the biggest supporter of the film, about halfway through the film, I was just going to finish it up as a small film for Gilda's Club and kind of let it be what it was. And then he gave me access to Gilda's boxes that had been in storage since she passed away. And in those were diaries and audio recordings she did and her photo albums. And that was like the changing moment of the creative of the film.
Right.
Because once I was able to start listening to Gilda, I listened to all of Gilda's interviews that were available, through NBC or ABC or online. And when I listened to her personal audio tapes and I can really hear her talking and really hear her telling a story, it was like as if she was talking to me. And I think everybody who's been involved in the film, all the editors and producers and everyone has that feeling when they hear the real authentic Gilda that she's actually talking directly to them. So that was really the changing point. And that was my goal, was to try to create a film that was really Gilda's story from her point of view as much as I could tell it from her point of view.
And what was excuse me, the process by which you began courting people to talk about her and of her and people who were inspired by her, as you were looking to get other voices into the film that were besides Gilda's? What was that process like for you as you began trying to get those lead dominoes and get those people on camera for you?
I think, in some ways that's why the film took so long, because it took a while each person led to another person who led to another person. So once somebody felt comfortable being filmed, like first it was Alan and Robin Zidell, Gilda's good friends, and Gilda's writing partner on SNL. And then a couple months later, it was Michael, Gilda's brother. And then a couple months later, it was Gilda's best friend, Judy. So it really took, and then I started to get more of the more famous people like Paul Schaefer and Lorraine Newman. And then that led to, Martin Short. And then like Amy Poehler led to all the modern day comedians. So each person kind of led to another person. It would have been great if I shot everything at the same time, but each person was a separate shoot in a separate location. So, but it was all about trust. Trust that for Gilda's friends that I was doing the right story. And I think for the modern day comedians, it's a gift if anyone's going to be in your documentary, because their managers and their agents, are not super supportive because there's no payment involved. And these are all really busy people who are getting dozens, if not hundreds of offers to do things. So it's really a gift that anybody would participate in a documentary. And I think they do it because they really believe in what you're doing. And in my case, I really love Gilda and really truly was inspired by her.
Yeah, I had written down in my notes trust, actually, because projects of this nature, you do have to engender trust from the core people, and then as that radiates out, it validates the enterprise, and you get people on board. And at what point did you, or how did you engender the trust that it took to get that ball rolling, get that momentum, so you could secure a lot of these titans of the comedic industry into your movie?
Well, I had a really good producer, James, who has a great reputation in the industry with getting talent. So that was really helpful because he knew how to get to talent, which is really important. But I think trust, I don't know. I mean, that's always been my goal is to really tell an honest story of Gilda. And she's a really good person to do an honest story about because she doesn't have, though she has insecurities, she's a very optimistic, um, she's a very optimistic person. And her story, though it's sad, what happened to her is still an inspiring story. So I tried to always keep to the truth. So I think her friends kind of understood that. And also, they were such a good resource. Besides Michael, um, who was supportive in every way, Gilda's best friends, Judy and Pam, and her friend Robin, they all gave me, over periods of time, their home movies and letters. And I think that they got to a point where they did trust me. And then when they saw this, and then there was another, moment when everyone sees the film and you wonder, oh my God, are they going to be? I mean, I tested different ideas about it, but you worry, because I never met Gilda. The film is the creation of my imagination of who she is.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a very, especially with Gilda's brother, I was very concerned of how, did I really capture the real Gilda? And, her friends will say I did. Like her friend Alan told me, he's been wonderful, him and Robin, promoting the film. So they go out to a lot of screenings and then do like a question and answer afterwards. And Alan just emailed me a couple of days ago. He's like, the film gets better every time I see it.
Oh, wow.
And that means a lot.
Yeah.
That everyone feels, and they feel even more that they feel like they got Gilda back in some ways because everybody loved her. And, she died so young and she was such a big part. Besides having a really strong, close circle of friends, Gilda had dozens and dozens and dozens of people in her life who loved her, who were good friends. Somehow Gilda had like a million friends besides the audiences who loved her. So it was I think it was building their trust, but also people didn't really want to talk about her because it made them sad.
Mm.
And I think the movie, in some ways, brings her back. Though some of her friends are like, it makes me too sad, I can't see it again. But other people are like, but everyone does like it in her circle of friends. So that's probably the thing I feel most proud of.
Yeah. Wow. And when you got some of the material, I'm thinking of her journals and a lot of those great archival home movies. When you got those in your hands, like what was going through your mind when you had that material in your lap?
Well, the first, there were the audio. So in her collection that Michael had was a whole lot of audio tapes. So there are audio tapes that Gilda created for her book. And there were 32 hours of audio tapes for that, among other things that she just recorded. But the audio was, besides being amazing, was extremely damaged. And each tape had a different problem. And each part of each tape had a different problem. Like there were some tapes that were great. And then you get to a point when you just couldn't hear. You could always hear, but it was always warped, or there were so many different problems. So since my goal was to really have Gilda tell her story, the first thing we really did was go through all the audio tapes and put together a film based on these audio tapes. And so the first cut of the film had a lot of bad audio, and we tried everywhere, post-production companies all over the world, in Berlin, and nobody could really fix. At that point, no one could really fix the tapes. So the first rendition of the film was with subtitles. And my filmmaker friends were like, it's okay, it's really Gilda. And then my non-filmmaker friends were like, this is really annoying, and I can't hear, and I can't watch. And so that was going through the audio was really hard. And then subsequently, we went and found a lot of different interviews that she had done that, like, even like the interview you and I are doing, back in the day, people would record it on an audio, on a cassette tape. Mm-hmm. And we actually found a few of the journalists who kept their tapes, including two students from the University of Michigan who went and interviewed Gilda in 1977 or 78 at SNL, and they kept the tape.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so then we were able to start supplementing some of the bad audio with some good audio. Then we started using her audiobook, which I didn't really want to use because she had recorded her book 3 weeks before she died. So to me, I could hear the sadness in her voice, so I tried to limit that. And so in terms of all the material, that was the first layer, was getting through the audio. And until we were in audio post-production, I didn't even know if it would work, because along the way there were editors telling me we needed to get an accent in and read some of Gilda's voiceover, and that was something that I never really wanted. So, and then we had this amazing guy named Dominic Bartoli, who actually was able to really fix some of the bad audio, which was, and I don't know what he did or how he does it, but so that was the hardest. And then the journals were just, another layer. So to me, the audio was Gilda telling her story. And the journals that we use, I tried to have like her inner voice, like tell the part of her story that she didn't tell and feel her friends could tell.
Those are brilliant. You can see how excited, Amy Poehler and Bill Hader and Cecily Strong were when they had that in their hands. It was like, Indiana Jones getting his hands on the Ark of the Covenant. It was pure treasure.
Yeah, that was surprising, because at that point I'd had the diaries for a year, and I mostly read from something I call the Fame Diary, where Gilda just writes down random thoughts or sketches or things about Fame. And I got so used to having her diaries, so when I pulled them out to each of the actors, their reaction was so strong, and so I wasn't really expecting that at all, which was really nice.
And in over the course of the project, like you said, 4.5 years, what part of making a film like this, where do you feel most alive and most engaged in that process?
I think for me, it's when I'm interviewing people. I love that, and I loved hearing about Gilda from her friends, and I loved hearing about Amy and Bill and everyone inspired by Gilda. So that's my favorite part of the whole process, is actually the interview process. And then I love when it's in a rough cut. That's really good, when it's all like together and you have something. And then when it's really done, I don't know, because it's never really done.
Right.
It is what it is. But to me, it's the process of sitting there and interviewing and hearing, and learning, because I think that's what to me, documentaries are, is just like, you learn from these interviews. I mean, you learn from the research you do, but there's nothing like listening to somebody tell a story, or from their point of view. You learn so much. And in some ways, because the interviews were over a period of time, it allowed me to be able to go and research things in the meantime that I had learned, places Gilda was that was never anywhere online. I would hear about from an interview, and then I could go through archival and try to find, she was in Boston, maybe there's something in Boston. So I think I also love the whole detective work of it all.
Oh, yeah.
Kate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like an act of discovery. You know, this thing leads to that thing, and then it just all of a sudden you're like, "Whoa!" Like I could have never imagined that on day one that it was going to reveal this. But over the course of your research and interviewing, you're like, "Holy cow! I'm over here now. I would have never thought of that."
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating, and it's really fascinating. I mean, it's really fascinating to get into somebody's life and read their journals and kind of know what they're thinking or create what you're thinking or think about. Why do you like? You know, I was sitting with Dan, my editor, David, and we'll be like, "Why do you think Gilda was like?" We'd analyze things in her life. Why did she do this Broadway play? Or why didn't she go out with this guy? It's like we're analyzing somebody's life. And it's really fun or interesting.
Hmm. When you're sitting in the editing room and maybe you have that rough cut and you know you have to still find ways to maybe trim it down or just tighten things up. What is that process like for you, and how ultimately how do you come to the decision about what to leave out, which is every bit as important as what you leave in, really?
Well, it's a collective process too. And in terms of our process, it was what we had too. Like the home movies were such a gem. So how do we use the home? Like we used all the home movies that we could.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, there's parts of Gilda's career that we left out because they weren't, you know, that were in there. There were interviews that were in there that came out. Also, I always do throughout this process. There are people that I show cuts to, and I've shown people in the industry and also friends who have nothing to do with filmmaking. So from the moment of like assemblies and cuts, I do show people to get their opinion too, to see what resonates with them and what doesn't resonate with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we did have a rough cut, we had a screening for like 100 people. And there were filmmakers and there were non-filmmakers, and my son brought a whole bunch of college kids who had no idea who Gilda was.
Oh, wow.
Which was really, yeah. So just to see like, you know, and then you still make, you know, I watch the film now and I think of every mistake that I made, you know, but that was one of the things I wanted to know is, would this film resonate with people who didn't know who Gilda was? So that was, so yeah, I mean, it's a process, and then you still, I think, kick yourself and say, why did I put that in, and why did I leave that in, and why didn't I focus more on this, or why did I focus too much on this? So I don't know. It just kind of happens, and then we had a deadline because we knew we got into the Tribeca Film Festival, so it was like the film is done. It has to be done. Because I think you can go on forever putting things in and taking things out.
Oh, definitely. Oh, absolutely. And I think that's something anyone creating anything can relate to. I forget who had the quote, but it was like, all morning I labored about putting a comma in, and I spent the afternoon taking the comma out. And it's just like, you know what I mean? Like you could really, yeah. The only difference between the finished product and what you're working on is that, you know, it's on a DVD now. I can't touch it anymore. It's published, but if I could, I would.
Yeah. And the audience is never, or the reader's not going to know the comma or not comma.
Right.
You know, so it's a process. You know, in some ways our process was, what do we have and why don't we have this other stuff? So there were things that we were searching for that, you know, because the film is, you know, strongly made up of Gilda's voice, you have to have visuals that go with it. And there were some good stories and things that had no visuals that we could find to tell the story. So there were things that were lost just because you know, there's just so many photos you can show. And if you have photos that don't make sense to what somebody's talking about, then so those were some of the cuts we made. Like there was this great story about Gilda being at camp and how she felt like such an outsider, and when she was in a play, all the pretty girls would be the princesses, and all the bossy girls would be next to the princesses, and then her, the fat girl, would be like the maid or the jester. And but the way she tells it, and then she's like, I would go into my cabin and I would eat Tootsie Rolls and I would just cry. And then I realized, I can't be pretty, but I could be funny. And it's such a great story.
Well, yeah, what a moment.
Yeah, but there was nothing to, and also the audio was really, really bad. And everyone was really telling me to lose the story, and I really didn't want to lose it. But the audio was really bad. So people didn't understand, I was the only one who understood. I could tell the story and it sounds really good, but if you were listening to the audio, you'd be like, what is she talking about? And then there was so that was like one of those things that creatively you're like, I love this. This is the best. And then you have, editors and producers saying, well, and audiences saying, well, we don't understand what she's talking about. And
I think the sentiment of that scene, even though as great as it would have been, but the way you were able to craft the story, you can feel that from her, like that moment in that scene about her using comedy as a way to win the acclaim, like using that as her secret weapon. And that bubbles through that sentiment bubbles through the whole film. So even though it wasn't in there, you knew of it enough to elicit it in the movie, if that makes any sense.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you got that. Yeah, because that was really heartbreaking to take out that audio. But yeah, I mean, that sort of, to me, was the sentiment of Gilda. And she did tell that story in different ways, but that was just the best way that she had told it. But you can't have you can't have everything.
And when you were putting together your component parts of the movie, how did you keep that organized? Like, are you a corkboard and index card kind of person, or Post-it notes? Like, how do you keep those things straight?
Well, for me, everything is in my head, which doesn't make it easier for people who work with you.
Right.
So that's but because this was a 4.5, a long process, the first 2 years, my editor, David, and I really, we transcribed everything and he put things into buckets, and I knew all the footage. I knew everything I had inside and out, and I had taken it and put it in my own, Premiere. Like, I made my own selects and I did my own things that had nothing to do with, I would show the editors, but I really knew that footage inside and out. And then when Anne, my main editor, who really, really edited the film, came in, she is the opposite of me. She is the index cards and she's super organized, like really super organized. So it was a really good component. It was a good person for me to have as an editor, because she was the opposite of me. She was super linear and organized, and I had it all in my head. Yeah, I know it's a different people have different ways of doing things. But to me, it was really sort of, I really needed to know the material inside and out. And I kept it, and I could always say, oh, yeah, in April 1976, Gilda talked about, in this tape, she talked about this. So I knew it. So that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Just to really say, once we really started post-production, we had an amazing edit team and a whole support system. We had a supervising editor. At one point, we had 2 editors. We had an assistant editor. We had another assistant editor. So because it's so heavily archived, it was a lot of work. And I did have thousands of photos and dozens of hours of audio and lots of interviews. So in terms of organizing, I really have to say the editors did an amazing job.
And this being your first feature-length documentary, what movies or documentaries were you watching or inspired by that you modeled yourself after as you were looking to, put this together?
Well, I watched every biography doc that I could find. And so that was really important to see how other people told the stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I was so, I'm not sure if there was anybody I modeled the film after. I think to me, I was sort of I had my actor's cap on, and I was sort of thinking of Gilda as a character and sort of going through it that way. Though I've seen so many great biodocs that and I can't even name any that, they're all, the Listen to Me Marlon doc was great, and the Kurt Cobain and Jane, and there were so many good ones.
When you were tackling this project, what it being your first one, I know you spent a lot of years at the ad agency doing that kind of production, but when you tackled this, what surprised you about how difficult it is to assemble a 90-minute feature documentary?
I think I was naive in the sense of the resources involved, because coming from, though I had done a lot of long form projects, like a lot of long form, our pretty serious topics in healthcare, that would be considered documentaries, but more for a corporate audience. And I didn't really, I always had a budget. I didn't ever have to think about raising money. And there were always resources available. So I think that was one of the hardest things, was realizing all the things that you need. And also budgets and documentaries are not the same as in advertising. So I couldn't exactly call, the editors and the some of the people I had worked on with before, because, they were making, a lot more money than unfortunately the documentary people make, or is it here into a documentary budget? So that was difficult to know who, where to find the right people in some sense. And then creatively, hour and a half carrying a story. I don't know. It sort of, it evolved over a period of time. I think working with a composer, I've never worked one-on-one with a composer on a real composer. I've worked with music houses who kind of hand you over things, but I've never worked intimately with a composer. And I really had a wonderful composer, Miriam Cutler, who came in. She really came in late in the project. I think I can't even remember, but she had like 6 weeks to compose the whole film. And I really learned from her how her process and how she worked really taught me the importance of music in a film. And I think just like how fascinating it is how a musical or composer feel, like how they see a film, and how so that was a real learning experience for me. And I think one of my favorite things that I learned making this film.
And is this a storytelling form that you feel like you want to return to for future projects?
Oh yeah. I love this. I love the discovery. I love the inspiring person. I love, it is sort of like acting in some ways, whereas when you're an actress, you're creating a character. So I found that this is very fulfilling, to have a subject and bring this person to life. So I really do love. I love this type of filmmaking.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, you've been very generous with your time. I'm so thrilled and honored that we got to talk about you and your process, and of course your wonderful movie, and tribute to Gilda Radner. Where can people find out more about you on maybe social media or website, and also get more familiar with the movie if they are not already familiar with it?
You can go to lovegilda.com and find out all about the on-demand and how to watch the film. And then basically my social media has been the film itself. So you can go on Facebook and find Love Gilda, or on Twitter. And basically my identity and Love Gilda has merged into one, which I think I have to spend some time and start my own and go out on my own in the social media world.
Swish. That was fun. Thank you to Lisa. Of course, you just heard her say this, but you can find her at Love Gilda Film on Twitter, and Love Gilda also has a Facebook page. Go check that out. Go rent or buy the movie. It's a pretty special film, and it's Lisa's first feature. Can you believe that? I can't wait to see what she comes up with next. Of course, you can follow the show in myriad places. It's on Twitter at CNFPod and at Brendan O'Mara, of course. I keep saying of course. Sorry. Stupid. If you have any questions or things you're struggling with, perhaps verbal tics and things you say over and over and over again in your work, shoot me a note. Be sure to share the show across your platforms to help grow our little community in our little corner of the internet. And go subscribe to my newsletter at BrendanO'Mara.com. When I say share the show, share it with one friend. Share it with the people who find you interesting on your social platforms. I don't care if you have 4 followers or 4,000. Doesn't matter. We're here to join arms in this true storytelling medium. I gotta finish my book, man. This stupid book. Gotta finish it. Why? Because I want to start like 2 other ones. I need to finish a stupid baseball book. I know how to sell it, don't I? Man. Anyway, that's it, brah. Remember, if you can't do, interview. See ya.